Well, welcome everybody to another great episode of Soul Searching, the Soul Recruitment Podcast. And I've got a very, very special guest in the house today, a lovely gentleman by the name of Jaemin Frazer. And who is Jaemin, you might ask? Jaemin is an author, TEDx speaker, and coach. He's the founder of the Insecurity Project and specializes in helping people eradicate insecurity so they can show up to life unhindered by doubt, fear, and self-limiting beliefs. He is widely recognized as one of Australia's leading life coaches and one of the leading voices globally in dealing with personal insecurity. Jaemin is the author of Elegantly Simple Solutions to Complex People Problems and the voice behind the popular 1 Minute Coach radio segment, heard by over 750,000 listeners daily. Welcome, Jaemin.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, mate, my pleasure. And I'm really excited about this podcast because I love going a little bit meta. I like to call it going meta, when we kind of take away the superficial stuff and take away the focus on the actions and activities that we do day to day, but dive more into the subconscious and into the personal and who we are, what makes us up, who we are. So this podcast is and this content is going to be really relevant. And I think it's going to be extremely relevant to anyone that is trying to do anything in their life. Doesn't have to be just about job seeking, about recruiting, about employment. Anybody who's trying to achieve anything in their life has to really understand who they are. They have to practice self-awareness. They have to develop that consciousness. And that's the only way to really make big changes in your life. And I'm sure you're going to go through all that kind of stuff today. So in particular, we're going to be dealing with the 7 essential practices for overcoming insecurity. But before we do that, I thought, let's throw it over to Jaemin to tell us just a bit about who he is, what brought him to where he is now, and then we'll kind of dive into some more content. So over to you, mate.
Okay, so a quick bit of my backstory. So I grew up in a country farming town called Collector, a town of 150 people. Yep. Moved to the big smoke, the bustling metropolis of Goulburn, a town of 20,000 people when I got married 21 years ago.
Great.
And I've lived here my whole life. I'm currently overlooking green rolling hills. I live on the edge of town, 20 acres.
Very jealous.
So it's a nice lifestyle. And my first working job, I thought I was going to join the army when I finished school, but I failed a drugs test. The last hoop to jump through to join the army, I was bailed up for having marijuana in my system, which was interesting because I'm straighty 180, had never been drunk, was just a good kid, and had a mate's 18th birthday party straight after school finished. He gave me a plate of hash cookies to hoe down, and I had no idea what I was eating. And then everyone else thought it was a great joke. And then, got done for drugs a week later. Talk
about bad timing, once in your life.
Or good timing, because the fork's in the road. I mean, I'm not quite sure how I would have survived in the army. It's very incongruent. Almost everything in my life, that level of structure and discipline is not aligned to me at all. So maybe he saved my life with marijuana. There you go.
Love it.
But the fork's in the road. So didn't go. I enrolled to do landscape architecture at university, and then didn't do that either. Deferred for a year and went fencing and shearing with my dad. Wow. In that time, I met my now wife. First time I saw this woman, I thought, my goodness, if ever I marry a woman, that's the one I want. And somehow convinced her that was a good idea. Right. Very much punching above my weight.
And just actually on that, because I love these kind of things. So where did you meet her for the first time? How did you come across her?
Oh, look, the church that I grew up in, we were launching a Christian school. And so the big fanfare of the opening, somehow she was invited to sing at the introduction. So she was a singer, and I laid eyes on this performer singing. I'm like, oh, my goodness, what has just happened? So I thought totally out of my league. Thought she was older, more sophisticated. Clearly wasn't from Goulburn. And then somehow through music, I was a drummer at the time. Through music, our paths crossed again, and I'll get to play at an event together. And
there you go.
got her phone number, and the rest is history.
Fantastic.
So, yeah. But then, and then a course change as well. I had grown up in a church that was meaningful to me, but through a camp that I went to, felt like that there was a sense of calling and purpose about going into ministry. So went to Bible college for 2 years and trained in ministry. Got given a role as the youth leader in my church, and then not long after that, got given the role as senior leader in my church. So at 23, was running a church and a school and a daycare center, and 6 weeks into the job, discovered that the daycare center and school were actually trading insolvently. And so it was a crash course in not only leadership, but business and conflict and all kinds of interesting things. So as pastor, you're invited into people's world all the time to have conversations about change, about the stuff that's going on in people's world. And that was always a great privilege. But I observed over the years that how ineffective those conversations about change often were. And the tendency for Christians was to outsource the change work to God a lot of the time. So if I just have faith, if I believe, if I just trust, then God will magically somehow take care of the rest, and I don't really need to do anything. So the idea of awareness and responsibility just seems so secular and out of the scope of the Christian experience. And so I was a very frustrated pastor, I think, because it just seemed so ineffective as a way of being useful to people. I got exposed to the coaching skill set at a retreat that I'd offered for the church. The guest speaker I brought in actually brought some coaching content, and I was gobsmacked the moment I heard that. I thought that is a missing technology. So straight away went and did some study, signed up for a diploma in life coaching, and day 2 of my first 3-day intensive just was such a strong sense of this is home for me, that I rang my wife and told her I was going to quit my job. I was also working as a school chaplain at the time. I was going to quit that job and start a coaching business, and all pepped up on juju beans from being in this coaching experience. Thought I was going to change the world, make $1 million. Wow. My wife cried, not happy tears, the other kind. Like, what are you doing, you crazy man? But I'm like, I've got this. This is going to be great. Gave myself 4 weeks to make it work and make a brand new business work.
4 weeks. It's not a long time.
Not a long time. But I kind of felt like it wasn't a massive shift. It wasn't like I was going from being an accountant to being a life coach, or being a car salesman to being a life coach. As pastor, I kind of was life coach in many ways. I just had some better tools and frameworks now. So I thought it was realistic. Anyway, long story short, ended up developing a program for employment agencies as my first point of where I thought I could add value. And that led to an eventual business partnership and training a bunch of coaches to deliver that program around the country, and some really interesting learning with some people who were very significantly stuck. And it was so cool cutting my teeth there, because it was like, if these tools are actually worth their salt, they should work for people who are really disempowered, not people who are naturally successful.
Actually, can I just jump in there, because this podcast is so relevant to employment and recruitment? What exactly did you coach, those agencies?
Sure. So at the time they were Stream 4 clients. I don't think employment agencies class them that way now, but they were the most stuck. So they're deemed to have the most non-vocational barriers to work. So sometimes mental health issues, sometimes they'd never been employed, sometimes they had anxiety and depression. There was a bunch of really deep stuff in the way. And so these agencies realized that it probably wasn't about just sending them to job interviews. They had to do some inner work first. That was probably what was getting in the way, their doubt and their fear and the story and past disappointments and failure. So they gave me 6 weeks one-on-one with each of these people just to dive into that world with them. And it was a lot of fun, because I, in my model, as we'll explore in a moment, practice 5 is get help from someone who doesn't care about you. So I discovered that practice when I started working with employment agencies, because I realized that if I came in as the expert, if I came in with an agenda, everyone in their world had an agenda for them. Everyone wanted something for them or from them. And the pressure was intense. And so I knew my only chance of being useful was to want nothing. And so I pushed that as hard as I could. I'd go in there consistently and say, hey, look, I know I look like a guy who cares and I sound like a guy who cares, but you can't confuse me for someone who gives a shit.
Yep.
Like you'll tell me sad stories. I won't cry. I won't lose any sleep over you. I'll forget about you when we're done here.
Yep.
I'm not another person who wants you to do something you don't want to do. My life's fine. Like, I'm not the one with the problem. But you tell me what you want and I'll give you everything I've got, everything I've got to help you get more of that. But you've got to want it, because me wanting it for you is useless. Right. And then often they'd say, oh, I don't even know what I want. And I'd say, bullshit. I do not believe you, not even for a moment. It's just hard. It's scary. Putting out there what you want just opens up the potential for doubt, for failure and for rejection and for conflict. Yep. But you do know. So holding that space, really showing up to serve, it was extraordinary, the kind of conversations I got to have with them and how quickly I watched some of them change. And I'll never forget that starting point, because
very
it was
interesting.
Yeah. So then I just continued to develop my coaching skill set, to develop my ability to be effective and useful for people trying to make lasting change. And that whole time exploring the fact that while the pain was always on the level of behavior and emotions and thinking, that wasn't what was causing it. The deeper issues were always around beliefs and story and fear. And so I kept building my own skill set about facilitating those kind of conversations. Yep. And the more that I'd go down that path, the more I'd discover that at the deepest level, the fear were always personal, and they were always around insecurities, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of inadequacy, the fear of something lacking or missing. So I just knew that if I was really going to facilitate transformation in people, I had to find a way of navigating insecurity as a problem. And first in my own life, like, I'm non-negotiable about smoking what I'm selling as a coach. Yep. I think the only way to be effective as a coach is to embody your message. No one really cares about what training you've done or what you know. It's like, is this working for you? Can I see this working for you? Yep. So out of the overflow of my own journey in overcoming insecurity and working out how to do that, then I think my whole business offering has been around the sharpest tools, frameworks, conversations for being able to solve insecurity, not just manage it, so that people could show up at their best where it matters most. Mm-hmm. And then the Insecurity Project was born as a result, as the fruit of all that process, about 2 years ago. A podcast, a couple of books, and here we are today.
Fantastic. I mean, and it must be quite sensitive and difficult, even still, to have those conversations with people and really try and sell what you do, because people have this barrier. They don't want to cross that. They don't want to go deep. They don't want to cross that barrier. Yeah, how do you go about that?
You're right. And people are insecure about being insecure. In fact, my business coach 2 years ago, when I announced that I was launching the Insecurity Project, that was the brand I wanted to go with. He's like, okay, so what's plan B when that doesn't work? Because that's a terrible business name. People are insecure about being insecure. No one's putting their hand up to do those kind of conversations. They're not paying for those conversations. Exactly. I promise you. And it goes against good business practice. You should be the security coach or the confidence coach or the self-esteem coach, not the insecurity coach.
You can't show weakness. You got to show strength.
No, that's right. And you got to pitch the prize, not the problem. Yep. And it was interesting because that really knocked the wind out of my sails for a couple of days. But then I went away and heard myself say, Jaemin, stop being such a little bitch. Like, it doesn't matter if he doesn't see your vision. What do you want? I'm like, I want to speak to the elephant in the room. Yep. I think people suffer greatly for not knowing how to navigate insecurity. So I want to go straight to that point. I want to have a very clear message that says insecurity is just like any problem. It can be solved. It has been solved. All you need to solve it is the proven framework and someone skillful enough to hold you in the space until it works. So you're going to be okay. And I think that has worked well for me, just to go, people feel that from me. They feel that, yes, this is a very vulnerable subject, but if they were ever going to talk about it with someone, well, may as well talk about it with the person who's devoted their whole life to thinking about that specific problem and can do it in a way without caring, can do it in a way without polluting the space by wanting them to be different or needing them to be different. I think when people feel that judgment-free space from me, they feel like I genuinely don't have a vested interest.
Yep.
Then they can come out of hiding and go, well, whether I should be insecure or shouldn't be insecure, that's irrelevant. I'm here and I want to face up to that. So I think, it is still a rare thing for people to be willing, but when they are, then here I am.
Yeah,
so
and when they are, I can just imagine the results that you can achieve. My God.
Well, you're right. It is quite incredible. It's amazing. I think change takes a long time coming, but it happens in a moment.
Yep.
I think there's this readiness piece, and when there's readiness, it's extraordinary what can happen as a result of that.
Fantastic. And I kind of want to tie this into recruitment and employment as well, but it is really relevant to everyone in their life. I mean, but in terms of recruiting and job seeking and getting promotions and managing people and all this kind of stuff, I mean, this is all very relevant because you're dealing with people's underlying psychology, beliefs, personality, and if you can deal with those things, it's amazing what you can achieve.
I agree, because to me, the end result of solving insecurities, you get to show up to life unhindered.
Yep.
You get to be at your best where it matters most. So who knows where it matters most? You get to decide where it matters most, whatever you're trying to succeed at.
Yeah.
It's getting a promotion, landing a job, succeeding in business, doing better at family, being more healthy. Well, that matters most to you. And so the stuff that's going to get in the way of that is your own storytelling and your insecurity.
Definitely.
If you were to remove that.
Yeah. Your own inner dialogue, which is what I like to call it. Your inner dialogue.
Yeah, it is inner dialogue for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. So, I mean, look, there's been over the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, there's been more and more talk of this kind of stuff. And we're dealing with more of these type of issues and concepts, and we're going deeper. Why do you think that is? And why, and obviously we know why it's so important, but why all of a sudden has this started to rise to the surface?
I like to think about an evolving consciousness in the planet. I think we solve increasingly complex problems, and then that opens up the next problem. So I think we're at a stage of life where we've solved a lot of other problems. And so this problem comes to the surface because what we're capable of as a society, as a world, like technologically, is extraordinary.
Yep.
That is no longer the limiting factor.
Definitely.
Now the limiting factor is our ability to be the kind of people who can step into that success. Yeah. So therefore insecurity now is the lid. It's the thing getting in the way. So I think that's why.
It. So true. I mean, we've done all we needed to do. We've advanced in so many areas, but we've kind of suppressed this side of things. But now we no longer can avoid it. We have to deal with it. We can't suppress it any longer.
Exactly. For the sake of the planet, we have to deal with it because, the issues of our day, they require people at their best to solve them. The issues of climate change, of global pandemics, of economies of scale, like they require secure leaders. Insecure leaders just make them worse. They create more fear, more panic, more control. So I dream of consulting to the UN on insecurity as a global subject. That's my big end game.
Wow, I love that. Absolutely. So let's dive in. The 7 essential practices for overcoming insecurity. Tell us more about these. Sounds fascinating. I'd love to hear more about them.
Well, I like Einstein's idea that things should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler.
Right.
So I
like that.
There's a lot of overly simplistic stuff in the personal development space, and it doesn't work. But it doesn't need to be overly complex either. It's just simple and hard. So my observation around the people who've solved insecurity is whether they're aware of it or not, in every case, these 7 things showed up. These were the things that they practiced that enabled them to get free.
Right. So
practice 1 is to step into the light. Yoda says, named must your fear be, before banish it you can. So typically people are in the dark. They're avoiding, they're running, they're hiding, they're pretending, they're blaming.
Yeah, they're covering, suppressing.
They're covering, of course, all of those things. Yeah. So if if you open Google Maps and type in a destination that you'd like to go to, the only other bit of information Google needs from you before giving you that map is where are you now? And often I find, if you don't know where you are now, you can't get there. So often I find people are so focused on where they want to be. They don't like here. They're frustrated about here. They're embarrassed about being here. And so they just avoid here, which means they can never get there. There's never a map because there's no clear path. So I think the first part of the practice is to stop running, is to name your foe, is to go, insecurity is the problem that I'm fighting. It's not my health. It's not my finances. It's not my relationships. People typically try and solve problems where they see the pain. So they see pain show up on the surface and they think, oh, I've got a money problem or a health problem or a relationship problem. Well, no, what if that's just symptoms of the deeper problem, which is in your own storytelling about yourself? So that willingness to do the self-awareness, turn all the lights on and be here, it's essential. Obviously, it impacts all other growth. If you don't do practice one, well, then none of the other practices have any value. So being clear that your fear is not, you're not afraid of failure. You're not even afraid of rejection. You're afraid of the implications of those things. If you were to fail, what would that mean about you? Now it's personal. If you were to be rejected, what would that say about you? Now it's personal. So the fear is always our own opinion of ourselves. And naming that as it is means that then you can get on with the work of dealing with that.
Great.
So that's practice one. Practice two, when someone gets clear that insecurity is their foe, then their next logical question is, well, why am I insecure? Where did that come from? Have a guess how people typically answer that question, do you think?
They probably say, get help somehow.
Well, they want to get help, but when they think about why, so why am I feeling bad about myself? Why do I have low self-esteem? Why would I have a poor opinion of myself?
Right. Well, I'd say people would generally judge external factors as success or as indicators for these things and say, all right, if that's how I'm feeling, let's try and attain or achieve all these external things. Maybe I'll feel better, but it's not addressing what's underneath.
Yeah, that is how they try and solve it. But even when they question why they like this in the first place, because that's a big part of being here, and typically they imagine they're here as a victim in some way, shape or form. So I am insecure because, my parents were divorced when I was 4 and that really hurt me. Or I am insecure because I was bullied all through primary school. Or I am insecure because
they play the blame game. They play
of course,
the blame game.
Makes sense. Right. Yeah, I'm insecure because of what has been said to me or done to me or not said or not done to me. It makes sense to reflect back and go, I can understand why I'm insecure because of all the terrible things that have happened.
Gotcha.
But practice 2 is 100% responsibility because it turns out that's not true. That's not why anyone is insecure. We're sense-making creatures. We go into the world and we tell stories about our experience. And so life is not about what happens to us. It's about the meaning we place on the things that happen to us.
Definitely.
So it turns out we're not the actor in the story someone else is writing. We are the storyteller.
Definitely. There's a great phrase that says, you play the cards you're dealt.
Sure. And you get to make of them what you will. So
absolutely.
That's a really important thing because you discover that you were the one that created insecurity. It wasn't created for you. It wasn't when someone said you were no good. It's when they said you were no good, you decided they were telling the truth.
Yeah.
Because you could have also said they weren't telling the truth. You could have also said they were jealous of you or they were having a bad day or they don't even know you. Yeah. But you decided that they were telling the truth. So therefore you owned that word and it became a curse to you. So
exactly.
The responsibility piece just says you're the one with the power here. You created this mess and you're the only one who can fix it, which is cool because then people stop looking outside of them for the solution.
Definitely. And for every one person that says you're this, that, or the other, there's another 10 that might say you're the exactly opposite. So just find those 10 if you need to feel better.
Well, or not even, because even the people who say you're awesome, you still got to decide whether they're telling the truth. And you might say, someone might say, you're awesome. You might decide, nah, they just want something from me.
Yep.
Or they're just saying that to be nice. So even someone saying you're awesome, that doesn't have the power to make you feel awesome.
True.
You are the one with all the power. You are the one deciding what's true and what's not true. So it's realizing how much power you actually have in this whole thing.
Definitely. And only
And
listening to yourself, in other words. Just
you are
blocking out
not a victim.
all the rest.
Yeah. Practice 3 then is to stack the pain. So only people in a point of pain create lasting change, which is interesting because I love thinking about smoking cigarettes as an example. Do you know anyone who smokes cigarettes? Have you got any friends or family that?
No. Oh, yeah, sure. I know people that smoke, definitely, but less and less these days. But yeah,
less and less these days. Well, you'd think it would be almost impossible to smoke in today's world, but it turns out it's not. There are still plenty of people around the world that smoke, and it illustrates this pain example perfectly because it turns out that just because something is killing you doesn't mean you have to pay attention to it killing you.
Right.
So, of course, we all know smoking's doing bad things. It's only doing bad things to your bank balance and to your physical health.
Yep.
But you can ignore that. You can focus on other things. You can focus on the comfort it gives you, the social status it gives you,
True.
the feeling it gives you. You can focus on that. And you can't focus on everything. So what you pay attention to determines your experience.
Yep.
So insecurity is to finish the smoking example, the people who quit smoking are simply the people who pay attention to the cost.
Right.
And then the cost becomes greater than the reward. And then every cell in their body goes, well, then let's stop because this is not worth it. No matter how addicted they are, it doesn't matter. If the pain is more than the pleasure, you stop. That's how life works. And so insecurity is exactly the same. Most people, insecurity is killing all of us. Unresolved insecurity is leading to madness. That is true. But just because that's true doesn't mean people have to pay attention to that. So if, however, you did pay attention to that and accurately assess the cost of insecurity, you'd be astounded at how much pain you are already carrying.
Yeah.
And if you lean into that pain, you have a very strong motivator to do whatever it takes to change.
Definitely. So, how much potential for change. It's a source of fuel that would be enormous.
Massive source of fuel.
Yep.
That's practice 3. Now, the downside of a pain motivation strategy is that it runs out of fuel the moment you move far enough away from that pain. Anthony Robbins calls it the pressure cooker analogy because it's often how people lose weight. They do so from a point of great pain, and then great pain drives great action leads to great change increases pleasure. So all the pains die down, and so has the motivation.
Okay, and then the fuel
6 months later
disappeared. The fuel's gone.
Fuel's gone.
Yep.
So there's got to be another fuel source, which is pleasure. So it's not just moving away from what and what don't you want. It's also what do you want. So practice 4 is to develop a compelling life vision. You got to have a quest. There's got to be a reason. There's got to be something burning about what it is that you want, what your life is all about. Stephen Covey says successful people begin with the end in mind, and they never lose sight of that.
Yep.
This journey kind of mirrors the hero's journey, and the hero's always got to have a quest. If Frodo is not compelled to destroy the ring in the lake of fire, why is he risking his neck every day? Like there's no purpose to his suffering.
Yeah.
He would just go back to bed. Yeah. But because he's got this compelling vision, he'll risk everything for the sake of it because it's worth it. So a journey into your fear about yourself is dangerous. It's scary. It's fraught with danger. You've got to have a big driver, and pain will be enough to get the process started, but it won't be enough to sustain the process.
Gotcha. So you have to start creating. If you haven't created it before, at least after starting the process, start creating that vision because that's going to fuel you for the future.
Exactly. Tap into desire. Practice 5, as I mentioned before, is to get help from someone who doesn't care about you. So again, the hero's journey, there's always a wisdom character. There's always a Gandalf, a Dumbledore, a Yoda, or a Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah.
And they're not the hero in the story, importantly. They're the guide.
Yes, they're the teacher.
I think they are. And without the teacher, the hero doesn't know what to do. So there is a point for getting help, but it's the right kind of help. I think the great challenge for people in my space, coaches, counselors, psychologists, is not to confuse the world about who the hero is.
Right.
Because there's lots of people that go into that space because they like to be the hero. They want to rescue people. They like to give advice.
Yeah.
They get significance out of that, but that in fact disempowers the hero in the story and is quite cruel. So,
I like that. I really like that. It's removing ego and remembering that it's all about the person you're there to serve.
100%. Because because you're going to have to get out of the way. Because again, it's not Mr. Miyagi who's going to go fight the bully.
That's right.
It's not Gandalf who's going to destroy the ring. It's Frodo. It's Daniel's son. So
Indeed.
eventually they're going to go have to do what they do, and the wisdom character is not going to be there.
Yep.
So you will need help, but then help will be gone in the real moment of crisis, and that's the whole point. You created this mess. No one's coming to save you. This exists in your head alone. If it could be solved by someone telling you you're awesome, it would have already been solved.
Yep.
Just go and talk to your mum for a bit and get a hug and you'd be fit.
Yep.
Or open Instagram and read the first 3 memes and you'd be fine.
Very true.
Not how it's fixed. You got to go face the dragon alone.
Yep.
And you either die or come out the other side reborn. So practice 6 is go be the hero. Go do what the hero does. Go track this back all the way back to the origin where this started and deconstruct this story.
Wow.
Until it makes no sense anymore. Discover once and for all, are you enough? Is it true?
Yep.
Are you good? Are you bad? Are you worthy of love or are you not? There's only one way to find out.
Yep.
And then practice 7 is to rewrite the story. So having come out the other side of that, having slayed the dragon, having realized you were always enough, it's then to retell the story, tell a beautiful, enlarging, empowered story. All we have is story, and people who succeed in life just tell better stories than those who don't.
Yep, definitely.
I find people want to rush to practice 7 and just go, oh yeah, I get it. I don't want to go back to my past. Can't I just write some affirmations on my mirror and just be positive? Well, you can do whatever you want. It's your life. But if you haven't deconstructed the old story first, and the moment you get tired, that narrative just pops its head out again and takes over as it's always done.
Yeah.
So rewriting the story follows on from deconstructing the old one.
Gotcha. And I can just imagine, I mean, this is a lifelong practice. These 7 steps probably are repeated constantly in cycles through your life.
Great distinction, because if you show up to life unhindered, well, guess what? You take massive steps forward, and taking massive steps forward pushes you into new levels of uncertainty. Yes. And new levels of uncertainty reveal hidden insecurities. So then the process starts again. So you're right, but it's the same process. It's the 7 practices for the level of growth that you're at now. Yes. And you'll use them again and again and again to make sure you stay unhindered.
Definitely. And just like anything, once you've done something the first time, you can do it a little bit easier, and you're not as scared of it when you do it the second time.
Absolutely.
Et cetera, et cetera. So, wow, that's fascinating. And so, I mean, obviously there's no shortcuts here. This is work that has to be done. You can't just take 1 step out or 2 steps out of the process and think you're going to change your life. It has to be done properly from 1 to 7 constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is some hard work involved, and it's probably some of the hardest, but yet most important work you'll ever do. And it's not like the whole world's waiting and watching, which is the tension of the hero's story, like the hero's journey. If it was easy and laid out in front, no one's watching. We're watching because there's tension. There's watching because the hero could die. The hero might fail. The hero might not complete the quest. That's why we're watching. So everyone's watching you. Everyone's watching me going, what's going to happen? Are they going to give up? Are they going to shut up? Are they going to go home? Are they going to get scared? Or are they going to find a way to bring their gift to the world? So it's high stakes.
Nice. And just out of interest, I mean, just a little interesting tangent. When people are going through this process, do you advocate that they, verbalize this and become accountable for it externally, or just keep it inside while they're doing it and just get on with it?
Well, I think accountability is overrated, and I think self-discipline is overrated. I think typically they're the go-to change strategies most people use. They're the only tools in the shed. Mm-hmm. But self-discipline requires you to fight against yourself to win. I think this is all about self-permission, giving yourself permission to go on this journey. That's a far more beautiful form of motivation. And accountability, again, like I tell people, listen, I'm not working harder than you. My life's fine. I've already worked out how to solve this. So, so I'm not holding you accountable. I don't care if you don't do your homework. If you don't want this, me wanting it for you is actually useless. Yeah. And it becomes part of the problem. So I'm not convinced accountability is that valuable in this process. It is very much you have to do it because you want to. And if you don't want to, something's going to stop in that process. No one can do the work for you. In saying that, we are relational beings and we do our best work in the context of community. And there's always journeymen in the hero's journey. So people come alongside and in and out of our lives and get to share part of this and can add value to that process.
Wow. Fantastic. I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more in a minute about how you actually put people through the process. But before we do that, have you got a case study or two, obviously being confidential, of someone that has really made incredible leaps in their life, whether it's personal or professional? I'd love to hear how this fits in.
Sure, it happens all the time. So working with someone recently, and they were a writer, so they are, and a ghostwriter to be precise. So telling other people's stories, a really important gift, but they were struggling to really do that with all their heart, and had this massive fear of rejection, of putting themselves out there and being rejected. And so the interesting work around exploring that fear and discovering the data of where that came from, leading back to a divorce of their parents were divorced at 4, and in their mind it made sense. I've watched my parents reject each other. I've watched them reject me. Of course I'm afraid of rejection. That's why I fear this, and it's true for me. It's like, well, hang on a minute. That's not what happened at all. Yes, your parents did get divorced, but in that moment you had to ask and answer 2 questions. Why did this happen, and what did it mean about me? And you answered those questions personally. And when he explored his own storytelling around that, why did this happen? Well, clearly I deserved this. Clearly I brought this on. Clearly I brought stress and anxiety to my parents' life. If I wasn't so annoying, if I cleaned my room once in a while, if I didn't ask for pocket money all the time, then they'd still be together. So what does this mean about me? It means that I hurt the people that I love. I'm dangerous. So it was off the back of that story that then this whole belief structure around rejection emerged, which impacted not just relationships, but health and business and finance and everything. And so resolving that by journeying back into what appeared to be a very painful, traumatic experience turned out to be not that painful or traumatic at all, because we weren't going back into the pain of the divorce. It was exploring the data of the story that was told around what that meant about him, and doing the adult work around retelling that story. And as a result of that, being able to then feel comfortable and relaxed in his own skin, and then even seeing the value of his gift to the world, realizing that there are people out there with stories to tell, and his gift is to draw that story out. And the world needs stories. The world is built on beautiful stories. And so the world is waiting for him to tell their stories. And so it's kind of bigger than him and not even about him. And so having solved his insecurity problem, he's free then to serve and bring his gift, and does that with great passion and energy. So wonderful watching that process and seeing him find the freedom to go be himself.
Yeah. And how long did
I pinch myself. Take? Well, so I do a 6-month coaching journey, because I think there's some work to be done. It's not 6 years, but it's not 6 weeks either. So there's some work to be done to make sure this is transformational.
Gotcha. So generally it's 6-month coaching sessions with you once a week, or is it done via?
Yeah, there's a variety of modalities. So I deliver most of my content online, or the videos or the modules or the reading or the stuff. And then it's a high level of personal coaching as a result of those online modules. And then some group stuff. I've just developed an algorithm for tracking progress.
Oh, wow.
So super excited about that, because my job is to help people solve insecurity. I do that by holding them in these 7 practices. And I know with a high level of certainty whether or not they're in the pocket, simply based on analyzing their language. That's the data I'm working on.
Right.
I used to think it was just my intuition that was telling me whether they were in the pocket or not. But that's not true at all. It's just pattern recognition.
Yep.
So our language betrays our strategies we're running. So I've done the work around eliciting all those patterns out of the language, build an algorithm. So now for the back end of the coaching, for each of those 7 practices, when someone, for instance, practice 2, take 100% responsibility, they jump on the algorithm. There's 10 questions they've got to ask as quickly and as honestly as possible. They give me that data in language, and they get numbers back. So they might get a 6.5% average across all those data points and go, what? That's ridiculous. But the numbers don't lie.
Yep.
So, and it reveals a blind spot. They might think they're taking responsibility, but the language shows up evidence of blame, excuse, avoidance, pretending. And so that's great because it turns out you only make lasting change when you're getting 8s, 9s, and 10s.
Wow. Okay.
It's a chance for them to reflect, hang on, you're right, I am avoiding, retake the test, change the strategy and self-coach and watch progress as they're going. They get to see this graph and on numbers. And so it's tracking what looks like really abstract, untrackable things. It's saying, no, it's really predictable and scientific, actually, the people who change. So.
Wow. Fantastic. Wow. So, I mean, obviously you've done a lot of work on that over the past to bring an algorithm together.
It feels like my life's work is representing up in that. So.
Outstanding. Fantastic. I mean, and I can imagine that people that go through this process, they'll start to already, if they start to see small changes or small benefits in their life, that'll push them further to dive further into it and really commit to what they're doing.
Of course, yeah. Progress feels great. You start to notice that. The pleasure around this builds. It's like self-awareness. Most people link massive pain to self-awareness. They go, I could never look beneath the surface. I could never face those dragons. It's too scary. But you open up this space, this safe space for self-awareness, and people discover something interesting about themselves and it unlocks something they've never known. It's like, wow, that was actually wonderful. I wonder what else.
And it almost becomes addictive. It almost becomes
addictive. It does become addictive.
Wow, I want more of this.
I want more. And because it always leads to more life. So you're right, the switch is flicked and there's much pleasure involved in great personal development.
Wow, fantastic. Well, I mean, as I mentioned, this stuff is really relevant to every single person, whether they're trying to achieve something personally, whether they're trying to achieve something professionally. Understanding yourself and doing the work on yourself is always the first step. It's something that I preach about all the time and blog about and post about all the time. And is there anything that, you might want to, any message or any little insight that you can leave the viewers to help them, really start going on that journey? Some people might be on the fence and still trying to commit to that journey. Anything that you can leave them to help them make that first step?
Sure. Well, something I've been thinking about a lot lately is the idea of suffering. So life is suffering. There's plenty of suffering in life that we wouldn't want to avoid even if we could. Like you look back over your life and think about the really hard things and some of the most meaningful experiences come out of pain and hardship, but they cause us to find something really deep and beautiful. So there's suffering that we shouldn't avoid and wouldn't want to avoid, but then there's suffering that we should avoid and can avoid. There's plenty of suffering that is entirely unnecessary. So I think insecurity falls into that category. People suffer needlessly for unresolved insecurity. They get stuck in their head. They pull back from life. They tolerate dysfunctional relationships. They undervalue themselves. Wow. Their health suffers, all because they don't know how to deal with the monster in their head telling them they're not good enough. So I think the message is that is unnecessary suffering. There is a way not to just manage insecurity, but to resolve that. So there's hope.
Think about that and
sorry.
So in other words, think about that and reflect on that as a driver, as a fuel to help you commit to making real change in your life.
Absolutely, there is a way out of this suffering.
Yep, love it. So, Jaemin, fantastic, mate. I mean, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, have a listen to you, or look at your videos, or read your book, podcasts, and that kind of thing? Sure.
One of the interesting things about the Insecurity Project, and my business coach who said it was a horrible idea, the name Insecurity Project is quite a masterstroke because I haven't found anyone else in the world who's branded themselves that clearly around that word insecurity. So not very hard to find. Someone in Salt Lake City types in how to overcome insecurity. I pop up number one on his search. He realizes I've got a podcast. He deep dives and watches 23 episodes and then gives me a call and says, well, let's do some work. Wow. So you can find me YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, for that podcast, on the socials. Yeah, I got a unique name, so that's an advantage too. People can work out how to spell it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so jaeminfrazer.com is my website, or Google the Insecurity Project and you'll find me without any trouble.
Oh, fantastic, Jaemin. Well, I mean, really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to be on the show today. And I think that was really, really valuable and really interesting for loads of people. And I'm hoping that people really heed that message and understand that whatever it is you want to achieve in your life, whether it's personal or professional, that applies to all of us, we need to do the work on ourselves first. We need to go meta. We need to think about our inner dialogue before we can really achieve those things we need. And, being that this is a recruitment or an employment podcast, it's relevant to everybody that's working as well. Whether you want to find jobs, you find your dream job, when you want to get a promotion, where you want to have better relationships with your work colleagues, whether you want to learn how to manage people better, all this stuff is really linked to who you are, what your inner dialogue is, which drives all your actions and your thinking at work. So I think, this is invaluable for people. And I think they'd be really doing them a great service if they go and have a look at all your stuff and your content. And I'm sure that we'd all get a lot out from it.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the conversation. It's been very enjoyable.
Fantastic, Jaemin. So thank you very much, mate. Really appreciate it and wish you best of luck in the future. No doubt we're going to hear more about you. And for all the listeners and viewers out there, thanks so much for, following the show. And we've got loads of stuff coming up for you next. But that's the end of this episode, and we'll see you very soon.
Okay.
Thanks again, Jaemin.